Good day, dear viewers. Today, we embark on an extraordinary cosmic journey that will turn all perceptions of contact with extraterrestrial civilizations upside down. This is the story of a team of American astronauts who set out for a new planet, but found themselves at the center of events that surpassed all their expectations. Instead of meeting with alien life, they encountered its reality, and this was only the beginning. After 3 years of flight, their ship was intercepted by aliens who took them to their planet, where the crew ended up in captivity. But their spirit didn't break, and they found a way to escape. How will they survive? What awaits them next? You'll find the answers to these questions in our video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be the first to know the continuation of this captivating story. And here's a question for discussion in the comments. How would you have acted in the place of these astronauts, finding yourselves in the captivity of aliens? Good day, dear viewers. Today, we embark on an extraordinary cosmic journey that will turn all perceptions of contact with extraterrestrial civilizations upside down. This is the story of a team of American astronauts who set out for a new planet, but found themselves at the center of events that surpassed all their expectations. Instead of meeting with alien life, they encountered its reality, and this was only the beginning. Commander John Carter of the spaceship America 7, an experienced astronaut, already had several interplanetary missions under his belt. His team consisted of 8 people, each selected for their unique skills and abilities. Among them were Dr. Marion Warren, a space biologist, David Lincoln, a systems engineer, Catherine Wright, a robotics pilot, Robert Marks, a communications specialist, Elizabeth Foster, an astronomer, Thomas Brown, a bioengineer, Jason Lee, a mechanical operator, and Sarah Jones, a radio technician. Their mission was to explore a planet located in the Zeta Reticuli star system. This planet was discovered by the Hubble Space Telescope satellite and was considered one of the most suitable for life. The team was tasked with gathering data on its atmosphere, geology, and potential biology, as well as establishing contact with any possible forms of life. However, no one could have anticipated that their journey would become far more dangerous and mysterious than they had expected. Several months after launch, the America 7 reached the gravitational field surrounding the planet. Suddenly, radar signals detected movement deep in space. On the screens appeared something that made everyone freeze. It was a massive ship unlike anything known to humanity. It quickly approached the America 7, and it soon became clear that it was intentionally intercepting their route. Commander John Carter immediately declared combat readiness. All crew members took their positions and prepared for a possible collision or capture. However, instead of aggression, the alien ship contacted them, transmitting signals that were deciphered by the team. They received a message stating that their ship should follow, and any resistance would lead to destruction. Despite the seemingly hopeless situation, the team decided to trust the aliens and follow them. The alien ship was significantly larger and technologically more advanced than the America 7. After a few hours, they entered a portal that transported them to another part of the galaxy. When they emerged from the portal, an astonishing sight greeted them. The planet they had arrived on was covered in forests and mountains, with skies colored like a violet mist. However, this place was far from as safe as it initially seemed. The aliens, whom the crew called Zetons, turned out to be tall beings with bluish skin and large eyes. They spoke a language similar to human, although some words had entirely different meanings. The Zetons explained that they did not wish to cause harm but needed help. They showed a video recording depicting how their planet had been captured by another race called the Nexers. These creatures were small but very dangerous and used technologies that surpassed those of the Zetons. Now the Zetons needed allies to reclaim their planet. The America 7 crew was stunned by what they heard. They understood that intervening in a conflict between 2 extraterrestrial races was risky, but they couldn't leave the Zetons without assistance. The team agreed to help, and the Zetons led them to their base, where they met more representatives of their race. The Zetons explained that the Nexers had captured their planet to use its resources to create weapons that would destroy all life in the galaxy. At Zeton Base, the crew learned that Nexers were using the planet's energy to produce vast numbers of combat robots and weapons. These robots were created using technology that allowed them to adapt to any situation. They were nearly invulnerable and capable of moving at incredible speeds. To defeat the Nexers, the Zetons needed help from humans, as human technology was more advanced than that of the Zetons. The Zetons led the crew to their main headquarters, where they showed them a map of the planet and pointed out the locations of Nexer bases. They offered the crew the use of their ships to conduct an operation to liberate the planet. However, the crew needed time to prepare for battle. They spent several days training on new equipment and studying strategies that could help them defeat the Nexers. When the crew was ready, they set off toward the first Nexer base. The Zeton ships accompanied them, ready to provide support if necessary. As they approached the base, they saw that it was surrounded by huge walls covered in protective energy fields. These shields were so powerful that even the most advanced Zeton technology couldn't penetrate them. Commander John Carter and his team were stunned by the scale of the Nexer base. Huge buildings enclosed by walls looked like factories producing combat robots and weapons. Hundreds of robots patrolled the surface of the base, guarding the territory and preparing for battle. However, the crew managed to find a weakness in the protective fields that allowed them to infiltrate the base. John Carter and his team decided to split into two groups. The first group, led by Carter, was tasked with infiltrating the base and destroying the control system core, which governed all the robots and weapons. The second group, led by David Lincoln, was to remain on the surface and provide support to the first group. They were also assigned to destroy any robots that could interfere with mission objectives. As the first group began advancing inside the base, they encountered numerous obstacles. The robots guarding the area were extremely dangerous and moved at incredible speeds. Nevertheless, the team successfully overcame these challenges and reached the control system core. They planted explosives and detonated them, destroying the central command unit. At that moment, all robots on the base lost control and began moving chaotically. The second group, under David Lincoln's leadership, also faced difficulties. They were attacked by robots attempting to stop them. However, the team managed to destroy all the enemy units and provided crucial support to the first group. When the explosion finally occurred, all robots on the base lost control, moving erratically across the site. When the explosion went off, all the robots at the base lost control and began moving chaotically. However, this was only the beginning. After the explosion occurred, the crew of America 7 and the Zetons realized that the Nexers would not give up easily. They began attacking the base from the air using their flying vehicles. These crafts were equipped with powerful weapons capable of destroying everything in their path. Commander John Carter and his team were forced to retreat. They returned to their ship and prepared to repel the attack. They used every available defense system to resist the assault. However, it wasn't that simple. The Nexer aircraft were so technologically advanced that their weapons could penetrate any protective systems aboard. America 7-. John Carter understood they couldn't allow the Nexers to take over the entire planet. He made the decision to use the ship's last energy reserves to activate a powerful shield that could temporarily halt the attack. At that moment, the crew managed to shoot down several Nexer aircraft, but the cost was too high. Sarah Jones, the radio technician, was wounded during the battle. Her condition was critical, and the team dedicated all its efforts to saving her. Meanwhile, important events were taking place at the Zeton base. The Zeton High Command decided to change strategy. They realized that successfully liberating the planet would require not just force, but also intelligence. They proposed that the crew of America 7 travel to a secret facility located deep beneath the planet's surface. This site had been created by the Zetons many centuries ago and contained technologies that could give the crew an advantage over the Nexers. The Zetons led the crew to the entrance of the underground complex. There, they encountered incredible technology unlike anything they had ever seen before. Among the devices were energy generators capable of creating incredibly powerful fields that could block any attacks, as well as tools that could control the thoughts and actions of the Nexer robots. However, using this equipment required both time and knowledge, resources the crew did not possess. John Carter and his team understood they had no other choice but to take the risk. They decided to enter the underground complex and study the technologies that might help them defeat the Nexers. They knew it would be a difficult task, but they were ready for any challenges ahead. As the team entered the underground complex, they encountered numerous difficulties. The first obstacle they faced were powerful energy fields blocking access to key technologies. Overcoming these barriers required time and effort. The crew used all their knowledge and skills to find a way inside. Inside the complex, the crew discovered a wide array of devices and technologies completely unlike anything they had encountered before. They realized these technologies had been developed by the Zetons centuries ago and required special approaches to operate effectively. At this point, Thomas Brown, the bioengineer, suggested applying biological engineering techniques to adapt the technologies to their needs. His idea was accepted, and the team began working on creating new devices that could aid them in the fight against the Nexers. Several days passed before the team was able to adapt the technology and create new devices. One of them was a generator capable of producing incredibly powerful fields that could block any attacks. Another was a control module that could influence the thoughts and actions of the Nexer robots. These devices were designed based on Zeton technology and had the potential to become decisive factors in the battle against the Nexers. When the crew returned to the Zeton base, they reported on their success. The Zetons were impressed that the team had managed to adapt their technology and create new devices. They offered the crew the chance to use these tools in the battle for the planet. However, the crew understood that the battle would be difficult and dangerous. They knew the Nexers would not surrender without a fight, and they needed to be prepared for any challenge. When the crew returned to the Zeton base, they reported their achievements. The Zetons were impressed that the team had managed to adapt their technology and develop new devices. They encouraged the crew to deploy these tools in the upcoming battle for the planet. However, the crew understood the confrontation would be tough and perilous. They were aware that the Nexers would not back down without resistance, and they had to prepare for any hardship. John Carter and his team decided to divide into two groups. The first group, under Carter's command, was tasked with deploying the field generators to block Nexo attacks. The second group, led by David Lincoln, was responsible for using the control module to influence the thoughts and actions of the Nexer robots. They believed this strategy could provide them with a crucial advantage in the coming battle. The first group, led by John Carter, began deploying the field generators at key locations across the planet. These generators produced extremely powerful shields capable of blocking any Nexo attacks. However, it wasn't easy. The Nexers deployed their aircraft to target the generators, attempting to destroy them. The team was forced to defend the generators using all available means. The second group, under David Lincoln, began employing the control module to influence the thoughts and actions of the Nexer robots. They started with the nearest units, trying to force them to stop attacking and switch sides to support the Zetons. However, this proved far from simple. The Nexer robots were programmable, and their programming was so sophisticated that it was extremely difficult to alter. The team continued working on modifying the programs of the Nexer robots. They used every available method, including bioengineering and artificial intelligence. However, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. The robots' programs were so complex that they were extremely difficult to alter. Nevertheless, the team refused to give up. They understood that success depended on every step taken, and each one was crucial. David Lincoln, a systems engineer, suggested using reverse engineering techniques to understand the structure of the robot programs and find vulnerabilities. Together with Thomas Brown, a bioengineer, they began analyzing the robot's code, trying to locate access points that could allow them to take control. It was a long and difficult process that required intense focus and attention to detail. Meanwhile, the first group, led by John Carter, continued protecting the field generators. The Nexers did not stop their attacks, and every time they attempted to destroy the generators, The team threw all their forces into defending them. Soon, it became clear that this couldn't last forever. The Nexers were using their aerial vehicles for continuous assaults, and protecting the generators was becoming increasingly difficult. The team had to act quickly and efficiently. They used every resource at their disposal, including weapons provided by the Zetons, to repel the attacks. However, it wasn't enough. The Nexers were too well prepared and held a numerical advantage. At this point, John Carter realized that they needed a new strategy. He decided to gather the entire team for a meeting to discuss the next steps. Together, they examined all possible options and came to the conclusion that the only way to defeat the Nexers was to combine their efforts and work together. They decided to use all available technologies and resources to create a powerful weapon capable of destroying the Nexers' main base. To accomplish this, they sent part of the team to a secret facility deep within the planet. This facility had been built by the Zetons many centuries ago and contained technologies that could give the crew an edge over the Nexers. The team understood that this would be a difficult task, but they were ready for any challenge. When the team arrived at the secret facility, they faced numerous difficulties. The first obstacle they encountered were powerful energy fields blocking access to key technologies. Overcoming these barriers took time and effort from the entire crew. They used all their knowledge and skills to find a way inside the complex. Inside, the crew discovered various devices and technologies unlike anything they had ever seen before. They realized these were ancient Zeton creations developed centuries ago and required a unique approach to operate. At this moment, Thomas Brown, the bioengineer, proposed using bioengineering methods to adapt these technologies to their needs. His idea was accepted, and the team began working on creating new devices that could aid them in their fight against the Nexers. Several days passed before the team successfully adapted the technology and built new devices. One of these was a generator capable of producing incredibly powerful fields that could block any attack. Another was a control module designed to influence the thoughts and actions of the Nexer robots. These devices, based on Zeton technology, had the potential to become decisive tools in the battle against the Nexers. When the crew returned to the Zeton base, they reported their success. The Zetons were impressed that the team had managed to adapt their ancient technology and develop new devices. They encouraged the crew to use these tools in the battle for the planet. However, the crew understood that the upcoming battle would be difficult and dangerous. They knew the Nexers wouldn't surrender easily, and they had to be prepared for any hardship. When the crew returned to the Zeton base, they reported their achievements. The Zetons were impressed that the team had managed to adapt their ancient technology and develop new devices. They urged the crew to deploy these tools in the final battle for the planet. Yet, the crew knew the battle ahead would be hard-fought and perilous. They were determined, knowing the Nexers wouldn't go down without a struggle. John Carter and his team decided to split into two groups. The first group, led by Carter, was tasked with using the field generators to block the Nexers' attacks. The second group, led by David Lincoln, was responsible for deploying the control module to influence the minds and actions of the Nexer robots. They believed this coordinated strategy could give them the upper hand. Once everything was in place, the team launched their final assault on the Nexer base. The field generators created massive shields that blocked every Nexo attack. Meanwhile, the control module began affecting the Nexer robots, causing them to stop fighting and turn against their own masters. The Nexers were overwhelmed and unable to resist this new power. In the end, the Nexers were forced to surrender. They left the planet, leaving it free once again. The Zetons and the crew of America 7 celebrated their victory. But John Carter and his team knew this was only the first victory. Many more challenges and trials awaited them in the future. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be the first to learn what happens next in this thrilling story. And here's a question for discussion in the comments. What would you do if you were in the place of these astronauts captured by aliens?